That is David Hume. David Hume was a philosopher and radical thinker who lived in Edinburgh along with his other philosopher friend Adam Smith. Now, David Hume was responsible for, in the city of Edinburgh, of starting a secret society of politicians and philosophers who would meet in Edinburgh, known as the Enlightenment Movement. It was this movement that pretty much discussed the cultural and significant changes that they would like to see brought to the city of Edinburgh. And because of this, Edinburgh became a multicultural, multifaceted city unlike any other. You can experience everything and anything in one place in this city, all thanks to people like David Hume and Adam Smith. Now, this statue has a significance. You see, before David Hume died, he admitted to his mates that he hated statues and he hated Greek philosophy. So in typical Scottish fashion, they gave him a statue just as a Greek philosopher. He also hated superstitions as well, so somebody started a rumour that if you were to rub his big toe, you'd get good luck. Hence why the big toe on the statue is the only part of him that's bronze. You gotta love this sense of humour like that. However, folks, if you are a Scottish hero and you are a Scottish legacy, you don't get a statue. If you want your name to be cemented throughout time and history, a statue doesn't do it justice. What you really need is this. Follow me. Right, so folks, we are standing on top of one of the many bridges that the city has. There's a lot of bridges that you'll find scattered across the city of Edinburgh, but we're going to talk about the two main ones that we're standing across right now. This is the King George IV Bridge, which was named after...
King George.
Yes, that's amazing! I mean, this woman's a genius, honestly. You should go on Mastermind, you'd be storming about it. No, in all seriousness, we are standing on top of the two bridges in the city. This is the North Bridge, and behind us is the South Bridge. Now, many years ago in the 1800s, a great fire burst out in the city of Edinburgh, devastating and destroying the majority of the buildings that are around us. So, to combat this, we built these bridges so that if a fire were to start on the bottom of the ground, it wouldn't climb up if the bridges were built like this high. So, these bridges are to stop the fire, but they also have some great significance as well. For example, the North Bridge that we're standing on will lead you all the way up to the Royal Mile and to Edinburgh Castle as well. However, the South Bridge leads you to Surgeons Hall and the Surgeons Hall Museum, where at one point in history, if you were to study to be a doctor or a surgeon, Edinburgh was the place to go to have your studies. This was the place to learn the best of how to be a surgeon or a doctor. Of course, throughout history, the Surgeons Hall is now a museum. I highly recommend it, and you'll check it out there. Now, the reason we call this bridge the King George IV Bridge is pretty simple. At one point in Scottish history, Scotland was considered an illegal and outlawed country, filled with criminals and barons and the disgusting likes of the sight. And so much of this happened when they decided to ban the Scots Gaelic, the Scots Tartan, and for some benign reason, they banned Scots whisky. It was a dark time to be Scottish. That all changed, however, when King George IV, the gift that keeps on giving, arrived to Scotland one day, and he had a lovely little tour around the whole of Scotland. And he realised the Scots Gaelic is a gorgeous language, the Scots Tartan is a beautiful pattern, and most of all, the Scots whisky is delicious. And because of that, he took away the outlaw and he took away the banning, and Scotland was pretty much safe to be a beautiful country that you see before you today. However, what nobody tells you about in this story is when King George IV arrived in Scotland that day to save it, he arrived in Scotland wearing what he thought was a kilt. It wasn't a kilt, it was a tartan miniskirt, which he decided to pair off the outfit with bright pink leggings. How bright pink was his leggings? Imagine the lining of my coat, but louder. Like, you know, it was that pink. Nobody in Scotland had the heart to tell him, yeah, we don't dress like that down here, man. Like, that's not our uniform. It didn't matter. His contribution for what he'd done for Scotland was so enormous that to thank him, we not only gave him this bridge, but we gave him a true staple of Scottish history. We gave him a pub. We gave him the George IV Bar. I should point out that pub has only been open for 6 years, but the sentiment still counts. Alright folks, we're going to make our way to the next location now, but before we get there, there's going to be a quick health and safety announcement because we've got to cross the road to get to it. So all I say is when we get there, just stick with me at all times, wait for me to cross the road, and we'll make our way over to the next location. Are we ready? Right, follow me! buzzing to be here. But do we have any Harry Potter fans on the tour? Yeah, that's right, that's right. Well folks, we are standing outside the birthplace of Harry Potter. It says it on the door. This is the Elephant House Cafe. It was said that it was here that J.K. Rowling would come here on her day breaks from trying to find a job and come here and start penning the ideas down for what would eventually become the Harry Potter franchise. Many years have gone by, and as we all know, Harry Potter is a staple in literature. J.K. Rowling has made up to multi-millions from her book deals with Harry Potter. There's a film franchise series, there's a theme park attraction, there's tons and tons of things. Harry Potter is now part of popular culture, and we owe its roots right back here to the Elephant House Cafe. Now here's a bit of a sad story, folks. A couple of years ago, the building next door caught fire, a tremendously bad fire, that once it spread, it took out the existing building next door to it. And unfortunately, that building was the Elephant House Cafe. But don't fret, folks. We are currently in talks to try and get the Elephant House Cafe rebuilt and restored to preserve the name of what this cafe means to people. And I'm just going to say one more thing. If they open this cafe and they do not call it the Cafe of the Phoenix, I am going to be disappointed and very cross. Right, now on to our next location. Follow me, Muggles.
Rising from the flames.
To see in Scotland. If you're in Edinburgh for a while, then please, you must check out the building that has been a staple in the city of Edinburgh. That's right, Nando's. No, I'm kidding. I'm talking about that. It's the National. This is the National Museum of Scotland. One of the oldest buildings in the entire city, and it is one of the greatest visiting attractions you've ever seen. I used to go there a lot when I was a young lad for school trips to go see what was going on inside, and I cannot tell you how many great memories I've had inside that museum. If you go to the old part of the building, you will see everything from the prehistoric age to the fossils of the dinosaurs, to even some of the remnants of the early medieval times of Edinburgh history. However, if you go to the modern side of the building, you will get the whole entire history and back catalogue of Scotland. You will learn everything about Scotland in the modern part of the building. Everything from our local heroes such as Robert the Bruce or William Wallace, to even some of our greatest invention minds who gave us the steam engine, the paraffin lamp, the television, the telephone, and most of all, the man that discovered penicillin. You will learn all about that and more in that part of the museum. It's great. Also, you can go all the way to the top of that side of the building and get a gorgeous landscape shot of the entire of Edinburgh. It is a great sight to see. However, if that doesn't tempt you enough, get this. As an exhibit in that museum, we have the first ever genetically altered cloned sheep. Dolly the sheep resides in that museum. Is it the real Dolly? Is it the clone? We don't know. But we've got it. It's right in there and it's so cool. So folks, if you fancy seeing something cool, like, you have to go see it for Dolly alone, you know, that is the place to go. Check out the museum while you can. It's free entry, much like this tour, and it is a fun day out. Right, now that we're done talking about sheep, let's go learn about a dog. Follow me. Now, ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce you to the doggiest dog that ever been dog. This is Bobby, Greyfriars Bobby, the greatest dog to ever live in the city of Edinburgh. When his master sadly passed away, Bobby remained loyal at his graveside, waiting for his master to come home. And he became such an Edinburgh fixture at that point that people in Edinburgh started to bring him bowls of water and food to eat to make sure that he wasn't starving or thirsty. He was unfortunately reunited with his master when he himself sadly passed away, but his legacy of what he means to be a royal landmark and a royal figure to the people in Edinburgh stuck out for a lot of people that we had to honour his name. He became an Edinburgh hero, so we gave him not only a statue, but we gave him that pub. Now here's the thing about the pub, folks. The owner of that pub is a marketing genius. For you see, the statue that we have here never used to face this way. It in fact used to face the front of the pub. And the owner of the pub realised that people were taking pictures of the dog statue away from the pub. So he decided in the middle of the night when Edinburgh went to sleep, he took a crowbar, stuck it in the statue, turned it around, and now when we have the dog facing this way, so whenever you take a picture of the dog statue, you also get a picture of the Great Friars Bobby pub itself. Marketing genius, if you ask me. Alright folks, feel free to take some pictures of the dog statue. I'll be standing right around the corner waiting for you, so if you just want to make your head up.
Yeah, get a good shot. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Camera loves you.
I'm camera shy, honestly, really. Like, you have a best angle. Like,
Oh yeah.
But you don't say
Yeah.
Now folks, there is no significance to this mural that we're standing at right now. As a matter of fact, this was painted 5 years ago. I just like bringing people here so that if they want to have a laugh and they want to have a selfie taken or anything like that up against this wall as a little memento, feel free. Don't let me hog all the limelight. If anybody would like to take a selfie up against this wall or anything like that, just make your way up and let the fun begin. Anyone? I just want you to take a look up here and you will see my biggest reason why I consider Edinburgh to be the greatest city in the world. Because no matter where you stand in the city of Edinburgh, you will get a fantastic view of Edinburgh Castle. You can be on the other side of the street, or you can be at this point right here. The Edinburgh Castle is the eyesore for everybody to see, and that is the perfect place to see it. Edinburgh Castle, wonderful place to see. Right folks, we're going to cross the road there, we'll cross after this car. Onward!
Go straight, like
Okay.
in the afternoon, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Okay, that's enough, that's enough. Right. So folks, we're currently standing outside the two joining parts of the city of Edinburgh. We are standing outside the Grassmarket and we just came down the Cowgate. Now, the Grassmarket at one point in history was a farmer's market here in the city of Edinburgh. So if you're a farmer and you had stuff to sell, like livestock or, farming things that you've sold in the house, this would be the place to go. The Cowgate was the road that would lead the livestock from down there to come to this farm. Now, what would obviously it was your typical kind of livestock, so it would be things like pigs, cows, sheep, chickens, turkeys, all that sort of thing. They would all come down this road to meet at the farmer's market right over there. Now, the farmer's market no longer exists in the Grassmarket these days because we have different means of selling things for the farms and all that sort of stuff. However, what we have the Grassmarket for now is wall-to-wall pubs. It is a street dedicated to the most top tier and best pubs you will find in the city of Edinburgh. Starting from the Black Bull and finishing all the way at Biddy Mulligan's, there is something for everybody to want to drink in this part of town. You fancy a nice quiet drink? Then the White Hart Inn is the best place to go. You fancy a nice bit of food to eat while having a bit of a music dance? Biddy Mulligan's is the place to go. But for my personal recommendation for a great place to drink in this part of the town, you have to drink in the Last Drop. It is a wonderful boozer in the Grassmarket. Well, you see, the Last Drop was the pub that was opened only for people who were going to be sent to the gallows. They would go to the Last Drop to have their last drop before taking a last drop. That's the only part of the tour that's anywhere scary and gothic, folks, don't worry about that. One more thing. Do we have any vegetarians or vegans on my tour? Anybody? Hi buddy, okay. Right. So if you're looking for something to eat later on the day and you haven't got anything to eat, I highly recommend Hula, right there. It's just behind that little pillar there. That's Hula. It's a vegan and vegetarian friendly restaurant. They also have seafood dishes if you guys are pescatarian as well. And it is a wonderful place where you get some good vegan food and vegetarian friendly food. Just say you went in there and then you're on one of my free tours, know what you're talking about. So just like you, oh that guy again. But no, if you're vegetarian and you need something different, because I know finding vegetarian options in the city is a bit difficult, but I highly recommend Hula. It's the best place to go for this one. Right, okay folks, we are now going to head to the most Instagrammed spot in Edinburgh City. That's right folks, we are heading to Victoria Street. Follow me. Set of stairs here that we're just ready to go under. Now, all I will say is that these stairs are very old, so they're built like a close, so they're very narrow and very close together. All I ask is that you just follow me going up in a single file, straight all the way up. And if you see anybody coming past, just let them past as well, so that we're not blocking anybody's way. But if you just stay on the left-hand side at all times next to the railing, we'll be up in no time. So, follow me.
Whoa. Yeah, my take. I was wait a minute.
Street in Edinburgh City. If you were to Google what to do in Edinburgh, I guarantee you the first image that will come up is an image of Victoria Street. It was said here that J.K. Rowling was inspired to create Diagon Alley based on Victoria Street alone. And you can see why. With its quirky shaped architecture, beautifully paintly coloured buildings and wonderful places to go, Diagon Alley and Victoria Street are literally a mirror reflection. To celebrate this, on this street we have not one, not two, but 3 Harry Potter shops on this street alone. We also have a wonderful pulled pork establishment, I do apologise, a pulled pork establishment called which is basically pulled pork on a roll. It is the perfect hangover cure, or so they tell me. We also have a wonderful bar over here called the Bull Bar, in which you'll get a fantastic selection of whiskies and beers from across the country served to you in one place. I mean, we also offer that at the Lost Close, but we're going to judge. But in order to really understand the beauty and the majesty of Victoria Street, folks, being in it doesn't do it justice. In order to understand it, we have to go above it. Follow me!
Tenéis fish and chips, tenéis las pies, que son estofados de carne o de pescado, con puré de patatas, con hojaldre metido al
Alright,
horno.
folks, if you just want to have a look over here.
I'll get you everything.
So, we are currently standing above Victoria Street, but it's also we're standing on the infrastructure of what is the Old Town. Now, the reason it's called the Old Town is pretty simple. Back in the olden times, as you'll know, we pretty much had a problem with the population of Edinburgh when it was 7,000 to 90,000 people and growing in the city itself. So to mass the population and to split it in two, the Edinburgh Council and the UNESCO Society decided to separate the cities in two so that we have a new city, like a new part of the city, a new part of the town that can bring in prospering businesses and split the population down the middle. We are standing in the Old Town, and the other part of the town is called the New Town. You guys are geniuses, you've got it all figured out, man. You guys should do the job, not me. But in all seriousness, they were moved to the New Town. And the New Town was pretty simple. It was a prospering place for new businesses and new financial growth. However, the people in the Old Town weren't sold on it straight away. As a matter of fact, when they tried to convince them to move to the New Town, the people from the Old Town just went, "What? You expect me to give up my home when I live in the Old Town to be part of a place I've never been before?" Don't make me laugh. Because that's how they spoke back then. It didn't matter, because the population that was split up in two ended up starting to move into the New Town and grow in popularity and in shops and business. And because of this, the New Town became a new part of the city with 45,000 people there that brought the new city to life. And because of this, we now have the Old Town and the New Town. But we still like to preserve what the Old Town means to people, hence why the majority of the architecture in the Old Town is still pretty much the architecture that existed from those years ago. In fact, if you look at the scaffolding on that building over there, they're not rebuilding or changing anything, they're just pretty much preserving the stonework of the building that was already existing there. So when the scaffolding goes away, the stonework will still be exactly the same as the stonework that it once was many years ago. Alright folks, we're going to go down a close now. You're on a lost close tour, and we're now going to go on a close that was found. So, let's make our way to a found close. Follow me. Okay folks, we're going to be crossing the road now, and we're going to be making our way through into James Court's Close. All I ask is that, much like the staircase, that you stay going the single file, you just go in a straight line, and just take in as much as you can and let anybody pass if they should. Also folks, I want you just to do one more experiment for me. Take a look around you right now. Take in the sights, take in the sounds. Take in the entirety of this busy part of the street. Because when we go through that close, you're going to feel like you're in a completely different city altogether. Let me show you.
thing?
Canada is hiring.
What about the MP roll? Do you know if they have that here? Is that a thing?
I think they do.
Okay. Pull it up.
My sister is a nurse. She's at Texas Children's.
Oh, okay, pediatrics.
Yeah.
Oh, kids already do it.
I don't know how she did it.
Didn't know.
Gather around, folks. And so, folks, welcome to the original tenements that existed in Edinburgh many years ago. These tenements were built for the population that was growing inside of the city of Edinburgh itself. In fact, one of the reasons why we have a class system in this country is because of these tenements alone. To prove this point, these were the original middle-class tenements that people could live in when they lived here at the time. Now, the middle-class tenements were effectively the best places to stay in Edinburgh. They had big, thick stone walls, wooden floors, working fireplaces, real curtains, real bed sheets, real duvets, pillows, and it was the best place to stay for anybody in the city. However, they were reserved for a certain type of people in Edinburgh. These were the people that had money. So they were your lawyers, they were your doctors, they were your accountants, they were your physicians, they were your philosophers, they were your priests. So they had access to these middle-class tenements because of their wealth and income. So they got the luxury. If you didn't have money, you had two options, and that was the top or bottom floors. The bottom floors meant you only had 4 grey walls, a doorway and a window. As for the top floor, good luck at getting to it, because you needed to climb 17 flights of stairs just to get to your home if you stayed on the top floor. It was not ideal. However, the 1700s were introduced to a new revolutionary invention that made them even more in demand for people to stay in. In the 1700s, the middle class was introduced to a thing called the toilet. Toilets were introduced to the city of Edinburgh, but they only went to the middle class floors. What did the top and bottom floors have to rival the toilet? Well, the Edinburgh Council in the 1700s started an act known to many as the Nastiness Act. And what the Nastiness Act was effectively a bucket. You had a bucket, and you would fill it throughout the entire day with your nastiness. And then at 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. in the morning, you would take the bucket, you would open your window, and you would empty out the contents of your bucket by chucking everything out onto the street while taking the Scots fridge vernacular word, Gardaloo, and chucking it right onto the ground. How much nastiness was that? Folks, believe me when I say that the nastiness of the Edinburgh Act was knee deep. Yes, it was a lot. In fact, as you can probably understand, we're kind of standing on a bit of a slant right now. There's a reason for that. All the nastiness that was collected would fall out into the street, and they would pour to these little concave paving slabs here, and they would all go into a reservoir right in the middle there. The reservoir was then sent down the street, and then it split off into 2 paths. On the north side of the city, we sent it to the Irish so they can deal with it. But on the south side of the city, we sent it to a part of the city which was known as the Nairn Loch. The Nairn Loch was the place where all of the nastiness and the reservoir met and collected in the city of the town. It no longer exists anymore. What we have instead today is Princess Street Gardens, which for some reason is surprisingly fertile and filled with good plants. But folks, I just want you to imagine something for me. This is how bad the Nastiness Act was. Imagine, if you will, you're a sailor, and you're out from Scotland for quite some time, and you decide to come home, and the first thing you want is to just have a pint. So you go to a pub, and you start having a beer. 1 beer turns into 3 or 4, until eventually you've had 15, and it's midnight, and it's closing time, and you need to go home. You're staggering home, you can barely remember how to stand up, let alone walk, so you're trying to make your way home after having a few pints, You can do it, you just can't remember where you stay again. But as you're walking down the street, you swear to God you hear a voice coming from somewhere. Because as you're walking down the road, you hear something along the lines of, Gardaloo! And then you look up. Ladies and gentlemen, it was at this point in time that Edinburgh invented the term shit-faced. I love that joke, I'll tell it to you. Right. So, once word of mouth got out that the middle class were the street that had money, it wasn't long until people were tempted to try and steal from the middle class to get money, or to get anything that they can to put their hands on money. How did we combat people stealing from the middle class when we had no CCTV cameras, no alarms, and barely a workable police service? Simple. We had a revolutionary idea. It was called architecture. Let me show you. Follow me. Welcome to my world. This will make sense just a second. Okay, come in close, folks, don't worry. So, as you know, the middle class was known for then to be the place to have the money. So everybody was going to try to steal from the middle class. Now, we didn't have alarms and we didn't have a proper police system, but what we did have was architecture. And once word got out that there was problems with people stealing from the middle class, they decided that architecture would be the best solution to stop this problem. This is the original stairwell of the stonework that leads to a middle class tenement. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, this is the stonework of an original middle floor tenement. These stairs lead to a middle floor, and they were purposefully built to stop people to try and steal from anybody who tried to break into it. And it was simple. If you just look at the stairs here, right, and we just count together, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These guys deliberately didn't put in a third stair. As a matter of fact, this is where the third step is supposed to go. But they deliberately put in a bigger, they deliberately never cut it out, so that they could put a massive second step on the staircase. Their idea was simple, is that if you were to break into a middle floor tenement, all you had on yourself was a candle at the time, you'd be walking up the stairs, counting your steps, trying to make your way up, trying to find the middle floor, till eventually you'd reach something that you didn't miscount. It would trip you up, it would wake up somebody in the middle floor tenement, they would grab a blunt instrument to scare you away, or they would open their bedroom window or any window at the time and just to shout, "Police! Police!" And it worked. We had, this was primitive criminal defense, no cameras, no alarms, but stairs. Because the common enemy of the common criminal is a staircase. And all you have to do is count from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Brilliant stuff. Right, now on to our next location. Follow me. Okay, so folks, we are now standing outside the National Writers' Museum of Scotland. In this museum, we celebrate some of the greatest names in literature history that have came from this country. We have so many great writers to pretty much put our name towards, and this museum celebrates only the golden few. For example, this building celebrates a man by the name of Robert Burns, or more commonly known by the Scots, Rabbie Burns. Rabbie Burns was one of Edinburgh's most prolific and sought-after poets. He wrote some of the greatest poems of all time. He even wrote the lyrics to the song Auld Lang Syne. So every New Year's, you owe him royalties. Now, here's the thing about Rabbie Burns. His father didn't want him to be a poet. As a matter of fact, his father wanted him to continue in the family business of being a farmer. Because in the Burns family, Rabbie Burns' father was a farmer, his father's father was a farmer, his father's father's father was a farmer, his father's 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 father was a farmer, his father's 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 father was a farmer, his father's father's father, you get the idea. So yeah, he came from a long line of farmers. However, Rabbie Burns discovered something quite amazing. He discovered that if he wrote poetry, not only would he get paid for the poems that he wrote, but it would also help him with the ladies. Because as much as he was a bit of an alky, Rabbie Burns was a notorious Casanova. The ladies loved him. So he would write a really beautiful romantic poem, like say, "Our love is like a red, red rose," publish it, and he would be sitting in a little pub somewhere, and a girl would walk over to him, excuse me, sorry, I couldn't help but notice you, but I just read that in the corner, and are you that Rabbie Burns who wrote that really beautiful love poem? And he would go, "Why, yes, that was me. Don't know why it's Sean Connery all of a sudden, but there you go. It worked every time. And folks, here's just a bit of tourist insider. If you meet somebody in Scotland and they say that they're a great grand descendant of Rabbie Burns, just say, yeah mate, everybody in Scotland is. He shagged everybody there. Another person that we celebrate in this museum is, in my opinion, one of the most important authors to be celebrated in this museum, and his name was Robert Louis Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson, apart from being one of the greatest writers to come from the city of Edinburgh, he's one of the most important because his contribution to fiction is so outstanding that we owe him so much in the world of literature. To give you an example of this, who is your favourite pirate? What? Hey, we got somebody actually named a real pirate, that's great. Anybody else have a favourite pirate? Yeah, that's fine, yeah. I get that a lot on this tour. I get Jack Sparrow, Johnny Depp, my personal favourite. Who was the guy that Orlando Bloom played? Yeah. But Billy Bond's fine, man, that was great. There's a reason I bring this up. Robert Louis Stevenson would write 2 novels that would change the face of pirate fiction forever. Those books were called Kidnapped and Treasure Island, the most famous books about pirates ever, because these books were just swashbuckling good fun about pirates sailing the 7 seas, finding treasure maps to go to mysterious islands to find treasure buried underground, only to fight off evil pirates who tried to steal the treasure from other people. He came up with all that. He gave us what we now know today as cool pirates. If it wasn't for Robert Louis Stevenson, we wouldn't have, well, Jack Sparrow. We owe him that. He also wrote one of the most important horror novels ever written, which was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was written as an allegory for the Scottish problem with alcohol. I mean, if you look at the context, it's a man who's nice by day, drinks a certain potion at night, turns into a monster. That is somebody on the berry. But there's one writer that I need to stress to you folks that, apart from anything else, this writer was Scottish, and his creation was Scottish, even though his creation and his stories mainly take place in London. Let me tell you a story about a man by the name of Arthur Conan Doyle. Conan Doyle was a medical student studying to be a doctor. And at the time, he was taught under the physician care of one of the most respected doctors working at Surgeons Hall at the time, a man by the name of Dr. Joseph Bell. Joseph Bell was a pioneering genius in medical studies and medical science. In fact, we owe the contribution and the discovery to forensic science to Dr. Bell, because he discovered that if you traced a problem back to its original source, you could figure out what it was that either killed or harmed or injured the person at hand. He proved this by inviting somebody up from his class and said, "You had to walk from the Grassmarket to get to my classroom today, didn't you, boy?" And the boy said, "Yes, that's right. How did you know?" And Dr. Bell said, "Simple. The Grassmarket has stonework that hasn't been finished off yet, so the clay that had came from the ground has climbed up your trouser legs. You had to walk through that clay to get to my lecture." This was revolutionary to everybody in the classroom, but most of all, it had a massive impact on our man Conan Doyle, who many years later, when he had to try and get some money to pay off student loans, somebody told him he could make good money from writing short stories. It was here he thought back to his wonderful doctor-teacher friend, Dr. Joseph Bell. And he thought to himself, if he wasn't a doctor, he would be a bloody good police officer. And it was here that Conan Doyle started penning the ideas down for what would ultimately change literature forever. For not only did he create crime fiction, he created the world's most famous detective. You all know him best as Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes was born, conceived, written and born in this city. He is a Scottish creation by a Scottish author. Now, we all know who Sherlock Holmes is. We've either read a Sherlock Holmes story, we've watched a Sherlock Holmes film, we've probably even watched the great Sherlock Holmes TV show that was on many years back. We all know who he is. He is a staple in literature. He's one of the most important fictional characters of all time. And there was only one man who hated Sherlock Holmes. That was Arthur Conan Doyle. You see, after a few years, Conan Doyle got fed up with writing Sherlock Holmes stories, and he wanted to write books about the Loch Ness Monster, the abominable snowman, the Yeti, Bigfoot. Serious, he wanted to write a book about mythical creatures. So he decided that he would write a book that would kill off Sherlock Holmes once and for all. It was at this point in time that he created a character called Professor James Moriarty, aka the main villain of Sherlock Holmes. The reason why Sherlock had to be stopped and die was Moriarty. And they had their final fight together in the Rickenback Falls as they're fighting each other out on top of a waterfall together until eventually Sherlock rugby tackles Moriarty and they fall to the bottom of the waterfall, landing to a watery grave. And Sherlock Holmes is never to be seen ever again. For 10 years. Well, you see, at that time, the Sherlock Holmes fan base were pestering Conan Doyle that they bring back Sherlock Holmes. Because you can just kill off Sherlock like that. It's not fair. He deserves more stories. So after 10 years and, well, you know, financial trouble, Conan Doyle went, okay, fine, I'm going to write one more Sherlock Holmes story, but I demand you pay me double for the publishing and double for the printing. They agreed, because it didn't matter. Because in that 10-year break, he still gave us what we know today as Hound of the Baskervilles, one of the most famous crime novels ever written, considered by many to be the greatest detective book of all time, and he wrote that in a 10-year break of not wanting to write them, but he still proved he had a story in him after all. So folks, as I say, Sherlock Holmes is a London hero. Like, I mean, obviously there's museums in London for Sherlock Holmes, you know, and all that sort of thing. But you gotta remember, Conan Doyle was a Scottish man. He was born in Edinburgh. He had a home here in Picardy Place on the other side of town. We have a statue for him on that other side of town, but it's not a statue of Conan Doyle. It's a statue of his greatest creation. It's a statue of Sherlock. However, because he's Scottish, we gave him the best legacy of all. We gave him a pub. We gave him the Conan Doyle bar. So whenever you go to the Conan Doyle, they do a smashing breakfast, by the way. Whenever you go to the Conan Doyle, you will be sitting in the pub celebrating the name of the man who gave us crime fiction. So folks, if you do one more thing for me, just one more thing. If you're in a pub quiz somewhere and somebody asks you, where does Sherlock Holmes come from? Just look at them with a smile on your face and a hope in your heart, and you look at them and you say, he came from Edinburgh. It'll be the wrong answer, but you'll still do it. There's another writer that we celebrate in this building, and that writer is Sir Walter Scott. Sir Walter Scott's contribution to Scotland and literature is massive. So massive that this museum only scratches the surface of what he actually achieved. In order to understand the brilliance and the majesty of what Walter Scott brought to Scotland, you don't need to come here. You need to see this. Follow me! Alright, it's just a picture. Alright folks, may I introduce you to the New Town! This is the New Town, the revolutionary new part of the city that changed Edinburgh by storm. We have a McDonald's down the road from a Burger King, a Five Guys Burgers and Fries across the road from a Subway, and a Starbucks literally next door to a Costa. We've got it all. This is the street for you. Now, if you guys are still up for seeing some wonderful tourist attractions, we have the National Gallery of Scotland, where you will see paintings and pictures of Scotland's old past from what it looked like before it got revolutionised over and over again. But on the other side of the street, we have the National Portrait Gallery of Scotland, where you will see the paintings of our local famous heroes that have made Edinburgh the city we know today. However, if you look over at that giant Victorian rocket ship that is sticking out of the ground, that is what we're here to talk about today. That is the Scots Monument. It is a monument built to the legacy and the contribution and name of Sir Walter Scott. So let's take a little history lesson. So, around about the time that Scotland was outlawed and considered a legal country back on the George IV Bridge, there was a lot of people in Scotland who were dead against this idea of the outlaw. One person in particular was so dead against it, Walter Scott, that he decided to write a series of novels celebrating Scotland. And in these books he would tell stories about the beautiful countries, the beautiful whiskies and the tartans and the Gaelics, everything that Scotland had to offer in this book. The series of novels were called the Waverley novels. Now, here's the thing. At that time, if you were a man and you wrote a novel, it wasn't considered cool. That's the best way I can put it. The best way I can put it is like this. It's like if you said back then you were going to write a book, it was like this. What? You're a man and you're going to write a novel? Lame! Loser! What sort of a man writes books? Men don't write books, that's for girls. You're a girl, Walter. You're reading girly books now, huh? Men don't write books, men write poetry. It didn't matter, because Walter went ahead and continued to write these books. However, he did write them with a fake name. But there was just another problem there as well. Walter Scott was the worst liar in existence. He'd be at a dinner party with his mates and he'd be going, "Hey guys, have any of you read the Waverley novel yet?" And somebody would go, "Oh yeah, I read it last week." And then Walter would go, "What did you think of it?" And somebody said, "Walter, did you write the Waverley novels?" And Walter said, "No, that wasn't me. That wasn't me at all. I never wrote the way. I can barely write my own name. What makes it? I didn't write it." Yeah, it was me. Eventually, one of Walter Scott's closest friends took him aside and he said to him, "Look, just admit you wrote the Waverley novels. Your contribution to what you've done to the city is so outstanding, you'd be ridiculous to ignore what the city means and what those books are." So after a period of time, Walter Scott came out and admitted that he was the man that wrote the Waverley novels. And because of this, King George IV knighted him Sir Walter Scott, just about the same time that he lifted the ban on this country. And also, folks, Walter Scott's name is still pretty synonymous in the city of Edinburgh. We have the Waverley train station, we have Waverley Bridge, and most of all, to really honour Walter's name, we have the Waverley pub. My favourite bar to drink in. Great place. But to explain the story of the monument, this is a lovely story. Now, Walter Scott stayed in the borders of Scotland, far away from the city of Edinburgh or anything like that, where it's a lot more hillside. It's mainly where the farmers would do their work. However, on a horse and carriage ride home, the gates of heaven opened up and rain fell down on anybody who lived in that area. Like, it was the worst and horrendous rain you'd ever seen. It soaked you through the bone. No part of your clothing would make dry or whatever. It was at this point in time in the horse and carriage, Walter Scott spotted this poor guy standing out in the middle of the borders, just getting drenched to the bone in water. And Walter Scott took pity on the man, so he stopped the horse and carriage and he said, "Excuse me, mate, do you want a lift?" And the man said, "Please." He got into the carriage with Walter Scott and the two started to share stories about where they came from, who they are, life, singing songs and all of this great stuff. And they became friends. To the point where when they reached the end of the journey, Walter Scott looked at our friend and said, "It's a pleasure to meet you, my friend. My name is Walter Scott and I have written the Waverley novels." And the man said, "It's an honour to meet you, sir. My name is George Meikle Kemp and I am an architect." And right about the time that Walter Scott passed away, he wrote in a will that if there was any man to build his monument, it'd have to be George Meikle Kemp. And that is how we have the Scott's monument to this day. I've got one more quick Walter Scott story to tell. This is my favourite one. But you see, as much as Walter Scott was a notorious liar, terrible liar, and you know, the man who pretty much invented the novel, Walter Scott was also pretty notorious for being a dog breeder. He kept breeding dogs. He loved dogs, so he was breeding dogs all the time. However, whenever he had a dog that was like the runt of the litter or the unhealthiest dog, he would turn up to other people's houses and give it to them as a gift. Because of this, he stopped getting invited to parties. Because he would turn up at somebody's house and go, "Hi, how you doing? Look, I brought you a dog." "No, Walter, no, we don't want a dog." So that's Walter Scott. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Walter Scott. Sometimes I think he's a genius and there's times when I think he's annoying. However, I have to say one thing about Walter Scott. Walter Scott pretty much invented the idea of Scottish tourism. If it wasn't for Walter Scott, I would be unemployed right about now. So on that much. Alright folks, we've only got a few more locations left before we finish the tour, but before we finish up, who would like to take some more pretty pictures? Brilliant! We are going to head right there. That is the School of Divinity. It was opened in the 1500s for people who were studying theology and philosophy. If you were studying to be a priest, this was the place to go. Now, we can't go inside the building because the building is still in operation as a school. However, we can stand inside the foyer. Follow me. Come in, folks. Take a look at this. Welcome, folks, to the School of Divinity. Or like I say, I would like to take you inside the building, but if you look for that window right there, you can kind of see it's still used as a school. But please feel free to just stand before you and just take some pictures. It is a beautiful spot to see. The man that helped put the idea of Scottish tourism on the map. But what really helped more than anything else was this building behind me. In 1858, this was opened. Behold, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, citizens of the known universe, I give you the first ever public tourist attraction. In 1858, this was opened up. This is Camera Obscura, the godfather of Scottish tourism. This was opened back in 1858 with a periscope system, meaning that there was a bunch of mirrors that were reflecting off the wall that would hit a certain light and it would create different shapes on the floor. And as the years go on, this building has continued to be one of the greatest landmark tourist attractions ever to see in the city. You can even go all the way to the top of the building and get a full 360-degree look at the city of Edinburgh. It is stunning. If you guys fancy a day out and you want to see something breathtaking, fun and exciting, then Camera Obscura is the place to go. These guys are still proving that they're the top tourist attraction to see in Scotland, putting me to shame. I'm okay with that. Alright folks, it's now time that we head to our final destination. That sounds more ominous than it actually sounds. It's just ready to fall me. Part of the tour. You've had the stories, you've had the history, you've had everything else, but now it's time for my favourite thing. That is the group selfie. Yes, excuse me, mate. Can I borrow you for just 5 seconds? Can you just have a tour guide? Just so you can take a picture of my tour. Alright guys, gather in.
Alright, y'all, push it a bit.
Push it away.
Push it. Give me a big smile. 3, 2, 1.
Yay!
Perfect.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Aaron, thank you so much. Give up Aaron, everybody.
Woo!
No worries.
Alright folks, we're now at the final story of the tour. We are standing outside Edinburgh Castle, and in 4 minutes time, you're going to hear the 1 o'clock gun go off outside this castle. What the 1 o'clock gun is, was a warning for the people that have the shipyards on the other side of town. You fire off the cannon and that would let you know when to bring your ships in and to take your ships out. We don't do it so much anymore because we have more conventional means to let the ships, you'll know. However, we keep the 1 o'clock gun going for a simple reason. We love tradition in this city. We love tradition so much that on one day a man was so excited to fire the 1 o'clock gun that he arrived right on time, he polished the cannon, he aimed it right, he put the ball in, he loaded the powder, he lit the fuse at 1 o'clock and he shot the cannon out. Which is all fine on paper, but there's just one problem. You're not supposed to load the gun for the 1 o'clock gun because you're firing a live cannon at the city of Edinburgh. This guy shot a live ammunition cannon into the city of Edinburgh. The cannonball shot out the cannon. There was this family in their house just trying to have their dinner when they heard this tremendous crash, this hit at the side of the wall. And they're like, what was that? What the hell was that? They run through to see that somebody had fired a cannon at their house. The cannonball was sticking in their living room wall. The landlord of the house at the time saw this and went, I'm having that. So he took some cement and he took some mortar, and if you look underneath those 2 windows there, folks, you will see the cannonball outside the house to this day. Because we love our traditions, we love our history, and most of all, we love our banter. And so much so that the restaurant right here has called itself the Cannonball Restaurant. because I love having a laugh. And all that's left for me to say, folks, that brings us to the end of the free tour. Have you guys had fun? Yeah. Great, guys.